In the sprawling hallways of a prestigious alien academy, where species from across the galaxy gathered to study diplomacy and war, a murmur of excitement filled the air. Zyrak, a reptilian student known for his sharp mind, exchanged a quick glance with Lilin, an empathic alien able to sense emotions. They had just attended their galactic warfare class, where the topic of the human clause was briefly mentioned, the unusual law that banned humans from galactic warfare. Curiosity took hold, fueled by the subtle yet unmistakable discomfort that rippled through their instructor when the topic came up. The instructor, a revered elder from a pacifist species, was an authority on galactic conflict and treaties. Yet, when they reached the section on humanity's involvement, they glossed over it, tension visible on their face. They had simply mentioned, "Humans are barred from participating in any intergalactic conflicts per Galactic Council law," then swiftly moved on, brushing past questions from the students. It was as if discussing humans in the context of warfare stirred something deeply unsettling. After class, Zyrak and Lilin gathered a small group of curious classmates, all eager to learn why humanity, a species with no apparent military superiority, was singled out in such a way. Together, they devised a plan to uncover what was hidden from their lessons. That evening, the group sneaked into the Academy's restricted archives, a place off-limits to students, reserved for records of the most dangerous and sensitive events in galactic history. They moved quietly, knowing they risked severe punishment if caught, but their curiosity pushed them onward. Row after row of data modules and digital records lined the dimly lit shelves, casting an eerie glow in the dark. After some searching, they finally stumbled upon an encrypted file labeled "Human Warfare Involvement, Restricted Access." They struggled with the encryption, each failed attempt raising their anxiety. Finally, with a satisfying click, the file unlocked, revealing a treasure trove of classified reports, footage, and testimonies. They gathered around, eager to learn what lay hidden about humans and their involvement in past wars. The records began with a brief introduction to humanity's involvement in a war waged centuries ago, an alliance formed out of necessity against a brutal, invasive force threatening multiple species. Humans, relatively new to the galactic stage at the time, had limited resources and less advanced technology compared to their allies. But even so, they were fierce and resilient in a way the galaxy hadn't seen before. As the group continued to read, the reports described how humans seemed to operate on an entirely different wavelength in battle. Human soldiers were quick to adapt, using creative tactics that the aliens had never considered. One report highlighted how humans utilized the terrain itself to gain an advantage, even setting traps with the most mundane materials. They worked with whatever they could find, from creating makeshift weapons to devising ambushes in areas other species would avoid. Human forces displayed an ingenuity that was both fascinating and terrifying. In one specific battle, humans turned the tide by exploiting an enemy species' deeply ingrained cultural fears. The report detailed how the human commanders researched their enemies' psychological weaknesses and orchestrated their tactics around those vulnerabilities. The alien foes, confronted with humans who could seemingly read into their most private fears, lost morale almost instantly, surrendering without further bloodshed. This wasn't simply warfare. It was psychological manipulation, something no other species had even thought to employ on this scale. Zyrak felt a strange mixture of awe and unease as he read, while Lilin's empathic senses picked up a lingering dread from the testimonies. Their allies had been grateful for the victory but disturbed by the methods humans had used to achieve it. These testimonies described alien soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder with human soldiers, watching them fight with a ferocity and determination that seemed almost unnatural, as if survival itself had been hardwired into their very being. But as the students delved deeper, they began to realize that these records weren't simply praising humanity's contributions. They hinted at something darker. Reports emerged of alien commanders who found themselves questioning their own values and ethics after witnessing humanity's methods in action. Humans were willing to go to lengths that other species considered morally unthinkable, their drive to win overshadowing concerns that their allies held dear. It became clear that this wasn't just about humans being good at war. There was a deep, unsettling quality to their approach, something that seemed almost primal. They weren't simply warriors, they were survivors, willing to sacrifice anything and everything to protect their own, to claim victory in the face of overwhelming odds. The group read on, horrified and captivated by what they found. Each report painted a clearer picture. Humans approached war with a unique intensity, one that was frighteningly effective and disturbingly raw. They didn't just fight battles, they tore through them, with an intensity that left their allies both in awe and deeply shaken. Finally, the students closed the file, exchanging nervous glances. They had uncovered only a portion of the story, yet they already felt a chilling respect for this mysterious species. Why had humanity been banned from warfare? The question now felt more pressing than ever, but they sensed the answer lay not just in humanity's tactics but in the impact those tactics had on those who fought alongside them. With this revelation, they realized they were only beginning to scratch the surface. The following night, the students gathered again, determined to continue their investigation. What they had seen only deepened their curiosity, even if it stirred unease. It wasn't just humanity's capabilities that intrigued them now. It was the question of why a species with such potential had been forcibly banned from conflict on a galactic scale. With heavy anticipation, they delved further into the archives, unearthing more restricted files and records, this time containing first-hand testimonies and vivid recordings from the front line. In these files, they discovered detailed accounts from alien soldiers who had fought alongside humans. One report was written by a seasoned commander from the Vraxen, a warrior species renowned for their unwavering loyalty and formidable battle skills. The commander recounted his initial admiration for human resilience but admitted that, over time, this admiration twisted into a profound discomfort. According to his account, human soldiers operated on a razor's edge, driven by an instinct far beyond tactical skill. They fought not merely with strategy but with an intensity that was deeply unsettling, almost as if their survival depended on overpowering every obstacle, no matter the cost. The students read in silence as the commander's words took a darker turn, describing how humans could endure pain and push past injuries that would incapacitate others. While Vraxen soldiers would withdraw when gravely injured, human soldiers seemed almost oblivious to pain, pushing forward with a single-minded focus that bordered on desperation. The alien commander confessed that, for the first time, he felt genuine fear, not of his enemies, but of his human allies. He wondered if humans possessed a primal drive, something he described as an unbreakable will that refuses surrender, that set them apart in a way he could barely comprehend. Zyrak and Lilin exchanged glances as they moved to the next file, a recording from a battlefield that had long since become a myth in the galaxy's collective memory. The footage opened with an alien platoon pinned down by enemy forces. The camera shook as explosions erupted around them, with alien soldiers taking cover and struggling to respond under heavy fire. Suddenly, human reinforcements arrived. What happened next stunned the students. The humans didn't advance cautiously like other species would. Instead, they charged forward in a coordinated yet seemingly reckless attack, moving with a level of courage that verged on terrifying. In the chaos, one human soldier took the lead, rallying both human and alien soldiers alike, urging them to push forward with an energy that seemed boundless. As the battle raged on, the students noticed how the humans adapted instantly to the shifting terrain and enemy tactics, as if they could predict their opponent's next move. The human soldiers made split-second decisions that defied logic yet worked flawlessly, demonstrating a grasp of strategy that was more instinctual than learned. Another document revealed even more disturbing details. It was an analysis compiled by a Zethan strategist, a highly respected tactician whose calm, logical nature was legendary among the Council's military advisors. His analysis included not just human strategies but psychological profiles. He had witnessed humans exploiting cultural taboos and psychological vulnerabilities of their enemies, using tactics that played on fears buried deep within each species' identity. To other civilizations, war was conducted within certain moral boundaries. But humans had learned to fight without those limitations, having faced countless challenges on their own home planet. According to the strategist, humans had an uncanny ability to weaponize fear itself, transforming simple battles into psychological warfare that no other species could endure without lasting scars. As they read, the students' unease grew. It wasn't just the brutal efficiency of human warfare that set them apart. It was the fact that they approached war with an intensity that felt almost boundless. They were both creators and destroyers on the battlefield, capable of fostering unshakable bonds with their allies and, simultaneously, unleashing devastating tactics against their foes. The students couldn't help but feel that humans were driven by a force that others could only begin to understand, a force born from millennia of struggle, survival, and resilience in a harsh world where only the strongest and most adaptable survived. The final document they uncovered in this session was a transcript from a high-ranking council member who had advocated for the human clause. The counselor had written passionately, warning that if humans were allowed to continue participating in intergalactic warfare, their influence would change the very nature of conflict itself. He argued that humanity's influence would push even the most peaceful civilizations toward more ruthless tactics, breaking the unwritten rules that had governed warfare for centuries. The counselor ended his argument by stating that humans hold a fire within them, a fire that, if left unchecked, would spread across the galaxy, igniting wars that would burn through the fabric of our unity and peace. The students finished reading, their minds whirling with a mix of admiration, fear, and respect. Humans were not banned simply because they were powerful warriors. They were banned because their way of war was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, because their methods, while effective, could reshape civilizations in their image, driving even the most peace-loving species to the edge of their own moral boundaries. In the days following their discovery, the alien students could hardly focus on their regular studies. The unsettling details of humanity's wartime conduct lingered in their minds, a potent mix of respect and trepidation. However, Zyrak and Lilin were more determined than ever to uncover the complete story. They wanted to understand the full reason behind the Council's decision to ban humans from participating in galactic warfare. The students knew their next step would be more challenging, but they were undeterred. After careful research, they learned of a human diplomat named Captain Elias Markov, an aging veteran who had been stationed on a remote diplomatic mission. Though his role now involved peace and cooperation, records indicated he had once served during humanity's brief stint in the Galactic War. This was an opportunity the students couldn't ignore. Arranging a meeting wasn't easy, but eventually, they found themselves face to face with the retired soldier, who was a stark contrast to the image they had built from the archives. Captain Markov was calm and soft-spoken, his presence surprisingly gentle. However, as they began their conversation, the intensity of his gaze hinted at the depth of his experiences, a depth that the students sensed immediately. They posed their question cautiously, unsure how he would react. "Captain Markov," Lilin started, "we're students of interstellar history, and we've recently been studying the ban on human involvement in warfare. We've read about your kind's extraordinary abilities on the battlefield. But we don't understand why the Council would choose to restrict a species with such skill." Captain Markov smiled faintly, as if he had been expecting this question for a long time. "Ah," he said, leaning back thoughtfully, "the ban isn't a punishment, nor is it about our combat capabilities alone. It's about something much more complex, something that cuts to the core of what it means to be human." He took a slow, steady breath, as if deciding how much to reveal. "Humans, we come from a world that's taught us to fight to survive. Earth isn't a paradise. It's a place where every day, species evolve and adapt in ways that push the limits of survival. Predators, natural disasters, disease, each of these has shaped humanity's instincts, hardened our resolve. By the time we reached the stars, we had already learned how to survive in conditions far harsher than many can imagine." The students listened intently, captivated by his words. Markov continued, "What the Council saw in us wasn't just another warrior race. They saw a species that had taken survival to an art form, a people who could endure when hope seemed gone. To fight alongside humans was to see beings who would push beyond all natural limits. We didn't just fight to win, we fought because, to us, giving up simply wasn't an option." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "But that's not the whole story. The Council didn't just fear what we could do to our enemies, they feared what we might inspire in our allies. We fight as if survival is all that matters. And sometimes that drive to survive can push one to abandon compassion, mercy, even sanity. In the short time we fought in the galaxy's wars, we showed others things they had never seen before. Tactics that were unthinkable. An intensity that, to many, seemed almost inhuman. The students exchanged uneasy glances, feeling the gravity of what he was saying. So, Zyrak asked slowly, the Council banned humans because they were afraid other species might start fighting like you? Markov nodded, his eyes somber. They were afraid that our allies would begin to see war as we did, not as a test of strategy or honor, but as a last stand, a battle for existence. If the galaxy's civilizations adopted that mindset, it would change the very nature of interstellar conflict. The Council feared a galaxy where even the most peaceful species would be willing to sacrifice everything to win. They saw the possibility of wars without end, where entire planets would burn because surrender was no longer an option. A silence fell over the room as the students tried to process what they were hearing. Lillian, her voice barely above a whisper, asked, "But how did you feel about the Council's decision, Captain? Did you want humanity to keep fighting?" The question seemed to catch Markov off guard. His expression softened, and for a moment, he looked almost vulnerable. "You know," he said quietly, "when I was a young soldier, I believed that strength meant pushing forward, refusing to back down no matter what. But over time, I learned that strength can also mean choosing peace. Forcing ourselves to step back from war was one of the hardest things we ever did. But it was also necessary. Humanity learned that our survival instinct, our drive to fight, needed to be balanced by a respect for life itself." He leaned forward, meeting each student's gaze. The Council's decision wasn't just about protecting other species from our influence. It was also about protecting us from becoming something we wouldn't want to be. They helped us realize that if we kept fighting, if we allowed our darker instincts to take over, we might lose something essential: our humanity. And that's a price no victory could justify. The students were left speechless, grappling with the profound truths they had uncovered. Humanity, they realized, was a species defined by both its capacity for unimaginable resilience and its struggle to restrain that same power. The Council's ban was more than a restriction, it was an act of preservation, a decision meant to prevent humanity from spiraling into a darkness that even they feared. As the conversation drew to a close, Captain Markov offered them a final piece of advice. "Remember," he said, "strength isn't just about what you can do, it's about knowing when not to act. War, for humans, was a trial by fire, and we came out of it changed. If there's one thing we've learned, it's that true power isn't about winning battles. It's about choosing which battles are worth fighting." With that, he nodded and stood, leaving the students with a newfound understanding and a lasting respect for humanity's legacy in the galaxy. The students left their meeting with Captain Markov in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The weight of the revelation settled over them, a profound understanding that both sobered and humbled them. Humanity's story was more than a tale of raw power, it was a complex, often dark, lesson on the costs of survival, on the line between resilience and ruthlessness, and on the fragility of a society's values. As they walked back toward the academy, Zyrak broke the silence. "The Council didn't just fear humans, did they?" he murmured. "They feared that the galaxy itself would lose something essential if we all learned to fight like them." Lillian nodded, feeling a mixture of awe and a deep sadness. "Captain Markov said that strength is knowing when not to act, but how many civilizations would actually have the wisdom to hold back once they learned what humans were capable of?" The group returned to the academy, but they no longer looked at the institution in the same way. The lessons and lectures on interstellar warfare, the histories of battles fought with honor and skill, all of it felt somehow incomplete now, as if a crucial chapter had been deliberately left out to protect them from a darker truth. The human clause, which once seemed like an inexplicable restriction, now felt like a necessary wall, holding back something vast and complex that few outside of humanity could understand. Days passed, and the group continued their studies, but they found themselves constantly reflecting on their newfound knowledge. The human ban was far more than a regulation, It was a safeguard, a decision made not only for the galaxy but also for humanity. They began to see how humanity had been changed by that decision, how a people born and honed in struggle had learned, somehow, to restrain themselves for the greater good. Eventually, the students found themselves revisiting their usual study hall, where an academy instructor was conducting a lecture on the nature of galactic diplomacy and the importance of restraint. They noticed how many students sat with eager faces, unaware of the story hidden in the academy's archives. Zyrak raised his hand, his voice steady but filled with purpose as he asked, "Professor, what is the true purpose of restraint in war? Is it only about respecting life, or is there something deeper we're being asked to protect?" The professor paused, perhaps sensing the weight of Zyrak's question. He answered diplomatically, explaining that restraint helped maintain galactic harmony, but his words were generic, surface level. The students exchanged a knowing glance. They understood that there was a deeper truth, one that perhaps couldn't be taught through lectures alone. After the lesson, the group reconvened, their curiosity still burning, tempered now by a sense of responsibility. "Maybe," Lillian said quietly, "we're not supposed to tell anyone else what we know. Maybe it's our role to uphold the human cause by not letting these truths spread any further." There was a long, contemplative silence, as each student considered the gravity of her words. They had uncovered a secret that held the potential to change galactic history, but they now understood that some truths were too powerful, too dangerous, to be shared without great caution. They had witnessed the potential consequences of unrestrained warfare, seen it in the haunted gaze of Captain Markov, and they didn't want to bear responsibility for leading others down a similar path. Finally, Zyrak spoke, his voice tinged with a mix of pride and solemnity. "I think that's what the Council wanted all along. For those who learn this truth to hold it as a personal lesson, a reminder of what can happen if we let ourselves become lost to war's allure." In the following weeks, the students returned to their studies, but with a newfound sense of maturity and purpose. The lessons they learned became personal commitments, not just academic theories. They approached each subject with the knowledge of humanity's history in their minds, understanding the balance between strength and restraint, between survival and the preservation of their own values. As time went on, the memory of their discovery faded from their daily routines, but its impact lingered. The students grew to be diplomats, strategists, and advisors, and each of them carried a subtle but unshakable resolve. They would work tirelessly to ensure that conflicts remained honorable, that diplomacy would prevail where possible, and that restraint would always be valued above conquest. Years later, Zyrak, now an influential diplomat, found himself at a council meeting, discussing a rising conflict between two powerful civilizations. He advocated fiercely for mediation, pressing for every possible diplomatic solution. His arguments were respected, his voice calm but firm, a voice that held the wisdom of knowing exactly what was at stake if peace failed. Occasionally, he thought of Captain Markov and the legacy of humanity that remained hidden behind closed doors. He had come to realize that humanity's strength, the raw will that terrified the Council, was perhaps also the galaxy's greatest asset, an asset that, ironically, could never be used. It was a paradox he would carry with him, a balance between fear and respect, danger and restraint. As he departed the council chambers after a long negotiation session, he passed by a group of young students studying in the open court. They were engrossed in their textbooks, learning the early lessons of diplomacy and strategy, discussing theories of warfare and peace. He paused briefly, a small smile playing at the corner of his mouth. He knew they would never fully understand the depth of what lay beyond those lessons, how restraint was not just a tactic but a lifeline, how a single choice could safeguard or destroy countless lives. Yet he also felt a sense of peace. These young minds would inherit a galaxy kept safe by those who had understood the darkness and chosen, time and again, to walk in the light. They would be shielded from the secrets that would remain buried, guarded by those who had witnessed the true power of human nature. In the end, the students had become more than scholars. They had become guardians of an ideal, a promise that the galaxy could continue forward without succumbing to the harshness that had forged humanity. They had learned not just history but a lesson in respect, humility, and the quiet power of restraint. With a final, silent nod to the students, Zyrak turned and walked away, the legacy of humanity, a legacy of strength, restraint, and silent vigilance, forever imprinted upon his soul.